Welcome to Season 3 of the SoundStage Audiophile Podcast. Last year, host Jorden Guth got a crash course in the fundamentals of hi-fi from enthusiasts, journalists, manufacturers, and music industry professionals alike. And those lessons will continue, but this year, Jorden will also get a history lesson from the legends who were there from the giddy-up and who made hi-fi what it is today. So with that out of the way, here's Jorden and this week's guest.
Hello and welcome to the SoundStage Audiophile Podcast. Today we are joined by a group of SoundStage reviewers, all of whom went to the Munich high-end show in Germany. And I wanted to bring them all together to kind of talk about high-end Germany or high-end 2024. So we have with us Matt Bonaccio, Jason Thorpe, and Doug Schneider. Welcome, guys.
Hey, Jorden.
Hey.
Hello.
So Doug and Jason have been on this show before, and they've also been to high-end Munich in the past, whereas this would have been Matt's first time in high-end Munich. But before I even get into the show stuff, Doug, why don't you give us kind of a little overview of what this trip was and Munich in general?
So the high-end show for about the last almost 10 years has grown to be the most important show in the year. Most audiophiles know that. It superseded CES in like 2015, 2016. There was kind of a cross. And this is the show to be at. And we've been there every year since the 90s. When it used to be held in Frankfurt, then sometime after 2000, it moved to Munich. And other than the COVID years, it was off. We've been there every year. And I've been there every year and every day every year, except this year. I was only there 2 out of 4 days because Matt and Jason proved at the Warsaw show last year that they are phenomenal show reporters. So I gave them the lead. And I realized on Friday that if I didn't take the time to work with Gordon on the back end, getting the content up, because we do our content as the show happens. The only publication in the world that starts when the show starts or a little before and ends the day the show ends. We weren't going to have it done in time. So I missed, it runs on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I missed Friday and Sunday in order that I could work with Gordon to get the content online. And so Jason and Matt were really the coverage team this year, and they did the best job of probably any coverage team.
That's incredible. And I think what's fascinating to me is there is quite a lot of content that gets published. Like, does any of you know how many articles total you ended up leaving with?
Yeah, something like 23. I think I had 10 or 11, and Jason could confirm this. I think he had 8 or 9.
I think I had 8.
And I had a couple.
That's right.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So 20 plus articles in a matter of 4 days.
Yeah, and the interesting thing here is that they're not just, here's what was in this room, here's the contents, here's how much they cost. We tried to sort of get inside the room and inside the heads of the people who were presenting the room and tried to give people a good feeling for what it's like to be at the show. So there were stories involved there too. It's not just sort of regurgitating the facts.
Yeah, it's not just kind of like pushing out what's being shown. It's actually going a little bit deeper.
And that was a change Jason and I made last year. In the past with our teams, what we would do is try to cover as many products as we could in a given year with the minimal amount of text. But the show is so big, you can't possibly cover everything anyway. So you're always going to miss something. Even if you get like 100 products, you're going to miss a whole bunch. So starting last year, what Jason and I did was fewer products, more in-depth stories, more personality, more interesting to read. And then the products can come after the show.
And so in terms of like percentages, if I was to ask you guys to ballpark of the 23 or 20 plus articles, let's say, how much percentage wise of the show does that actually cover?
5%.
If that.
0.1%.
That's
I looked it
insane.
up. Claudia Kasner's the media person for the show, and she sent out an email afterwards saying there were 513 exhibitors, almost 1,000 brands. Of course, you imagine each of those might bring several products.
Yeah.
Gosh, you can't cover it all in 40 days, much less 4.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter how big of a team. And I'll tell you something, and I want to get them to get into the coverage, but this is sort of the irony of the Munich show. Another manufacturer, who'll go nameless, brought it up because I don't think they wanted their private conversation talked about, so I'll just keep them named, but it was an astute observation. If someone goes to the Munich show, they think, wow, this is like the most lucrative industry in the world because look at all the companies, look at all the products. There's got to be $1 billion here. And you know what? It's not the most lucrative thing in the world. It's a bit of a smoke and mirrors. Basically, everyone comes to Munich, everyone. And some companies blow mistakenly their entire marketing budget in that one weekend. Huge mistake, but that's a whole other story. So it's big, but at the same time of a small industry.
And if we were to compare this of, let's say, the Warsaw show, which is another pretty prominent show, would this be twice the size, 3 times, like 4 times, or like?
What do you think, Jason? 2 to 3 times? At least twice.
I would say closer to 4.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Matt, does that seem reasonable to you?
Yeah, Warsaw is too much. Oh yeah, Matt was in Warsaw. What do you think, Matt?
It's kind of apples to oranges because in Warsaw we got the 3 different venues really. And maybe I'm getting off track here a little bit, but the thing that I noticed about Warsaw that was interesting is that a lot of people from the general public came and attended. Munich seems a little bit more trade oriented.
Considerably more. Actually, the first 2 days are trade days only. So it's the business show of the year. Then the next 2 days are the consumer days.
Oh, so there's not even general public accessibility on those first 2 days?
No.
Oh, fascinating.
So it's big business.
Was there specific trends that you saw that were different, like even from like Warsaw that was, let's say, 8 months ago now?
I didn't notice any trends hugely different from last year to this year from the stuff that I was covering. What's interesting with Munich is that we saw a number of the brands that the sort of the Eastern European stuff that we saw from Warsaw, people who were now coming to Munich. And so you had like a subset of some of these interesting brands that were in Warsaw that are from Poland and from some of the other areas that we recognized, like Fez Audio and Benny Audio turntables, and it felt like they were trying. It was the Eastern Bloc trying to sort of break into the rest of Europe. Oh, so that was kind of cool.
What about you, Matt? Was there anything that you noticed that in terms of product wise or what was actually being on display that you kind of see as a trend and kind of continuing on from that Warsaw show?
Well, I agree with what Jason said. Certainly, there was a huge presence of brands from all over the world, really. But yeah, especially more European brands, but not like the Western European brands. You saw a lot of brands out of Slavic countries, Poland. There's of course Greek and Slovakian and Russian companies there, which is cool. But as I touched on before, there were more of the general public at Warsaw. Well, maybe not in absolute terms. I don't know exactly how many people attended Warsaw, but there was more of the general public there. So I think brands kind of tailor what they show and how they show it to that.
Interesting.
But then in Munich, of course, we saw just so many new products being announced and debuted there. So I guess the point is you need to see both to get an idea of the trends.
Something else interesting that I didn't notice until I saw your article about it was the systems under $5,000 that you covered. So that I didn't notice anything like that at Warsaw. This seemed like it was specifically designed to sort of get people's heads out of the stratosphere, and it was something that I think Dennis probably would have appreciated for his website.
SoundStage Access.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know. I was under the impression that this is something that the organizers of the event in Munich do deliberately. And I think they might have done it last year too, but I saw it as a really interesting opportunity to get an idea of like, what are these companies, many of which you may not have heard of before, what are they putting together that is accessible for someone on a budget, and in some cases, even a very low budget. You can put together a complete system that's really impressive for not very much money. And
was this like, are these tags that are on specific units in kind of companies' displays, or how did you, like, how were you aware that these were part of the collection that was under 5,000?
Well, it was mentioned in some of the early press release stuff. And one thing that's really cool about Munich is that they put together a little app that you can download on your phone. It's free. And it gives you a guide to all of the different rooms, all the different brands that are represented. And I made a point to, they called it Sounds Clever, which is just their branding for these inexpensive systems. And I went around to all of them to see what they had to offer. And so that was the gist of it, was that they would put together a whole system, a whole room for under 5,000 euros. So some of them would come in substantially under that, or they would show other products that would come in under that. And then, they could have whatever they want to show off, but they could do, as long as it was under 5,000 euros, it was a part of the Sounds Clever thing.
And was there more categories as well than just the Sounds Clever, like those lower price? Was there like an extravagant category, an ultra category, and like a mid, or was it just kind of highlighting those more entry level? The
extravagant category is by default the Munich show. That's the default. Yeah.
Yep.
Does Munich tend to kind of gear more towards those esoteric kind of speaker systems?
Yes, and this is why we cover Munich. We don't cover as many shows as we used to. We go to shows for particular reasons. Warsaw is a great show to see a lot of companies you never see elsewhere. The traditional companies show up, but a lot of Eastern European companies show up. But Munich is the one where the world shows its new products. And we get criticized because we've never covered something called Axpona, which is the big trade show in the United States. And it happens 3 to 4 weeks before Munich, which I've always told them is a huge mistake. And why is it a huge mistake? Because nobody of significance debuts a product at Axpona that they're going to wait till Munich. And that's the scoop. So you really don't see much at Axpona. Axpona is a great show if you don't leave the United States. But Munich is the show for all the new products of the year, which used to be what CES did. And then Munich took that from CES.
Jason, you were going to mention about the expensive systems. What do we got going on for the expensive stuff there?
It's absolutely ridiculous. That multiple rooms over €500,000.
No way.
Yeah, at least $500,000, more like €1 million.
There's a few that were getting up. I saw a few that were getting up to close to the million. But
add in the cables and the stands and the power conditioners and all that, you're up to closer to $1 million, I think.
Yeah, I think the total, the Griffin room, which was one of the more extravagant rooms, I think they were around €500,000. But again, they're I don't want to say, I can't really say they're a value for money company, but because it's pretty.
But they are in the ultra high end. Their products they're about half the price of some of them. They're kind of.
That was sort of what I was going towards. I was sort of trying to do a little bit of a take back, because as I look at that $500,000, I'm looking at it going, yeah, that seems worth that kind of money. But then you've got to just give your head a little bit of a shake, because is it really worth $500,000? But in the grand scheme of things within audio, it's very, very easy to spend $500,000. You don't have to even breathe hard. They
do a good job of creating high value, high end. But then there was that Chinese horn speaker thing that we saw last year, and I guess it was back this year, and it's like €3.5 million.
Yeah, it's insane. You're getting a heck of a lot there. It's the biggest system I've ever seen in my life. It's like something off of the deck of the Titanic.
It's true.
Hopefully the company doesn't go down like the Titanic.
Somebody over there has a whole bunch of money to blow, and that's their hobby, and they've got more money than God. These were huge hand-laid carbon fiber horns that stood about 8 feet in the air.
Whoa!
With about a 6 or 7 foot diameter in the horns. Like you could quite literally climb into them.
And like 16 boxes of electronics.
Do God knows what.
Yeah, nobody can figure it out.
So are you noticing the same companies over and over again? Obviously, there's kind of like these main players that come back, but are there just new companies popping up every single time?
Yep. There's new ones every single time, and you can see that they're probably not. Some of them, I'd say a good 10% of them are not going to be there next year, because there's two real sections. There's this big sort of expo section that's kind of like the floor of a convention center with lots of little open booths with people showing their wares and stuff, where you see vacuum cleaners and the ShamWow thing, that sort of stuff. And within that whole area, there's also boxed in rooms that they build on site, like prefab rooms that you can go into and that are reasonably well soundproofed. And some of the companies, mid-sized companies, have their products on those floors. But then there's this whole surrounding area where there's these big honking rooms, and it's not cheap to display.
Not surrounding, but upstairs and then surrounding.
Yeah, upstairs. Yeah, right. There's 2 more floors above that, and it just goes on and on and on. It takes you. It took me until day 3 last year to get my bearings on where I was. But even with these small little open booths have to cost a fair amount of money. And you can see some of the products are not really finished.
They're not there yet.
They're not really there. And you just know Buddy's, going to have to explain to his wife why he spent the kids' college fund when he gets back.
And I think this leads to the problem that manufacturer who's been there many years noticed is you go to Munich and you think, wow, this has got to be a really lucrative industry. Look at all these companies. I'm going to create a company and come back next year and blow my life savings. And then you find out, no, it's not that simple. And even if they have a finished product, they usually don't have the finished marketing. They usually don't have the presentation. That usually takes 5 to 20 years.
Yeah. Even some of the larger not larger companies, but some of the companies that are somewhat established have a really good name. You can see that they're somewhat floundering on how to present themselves. They've got fantastic products, finished, beautiful, amazing sounding. But you talk to them, you say, so, marketing wise, and they kind of have a little bit of a frightened look because they're not really sure how to do this.
So, and I guess this is maybe kind of a higher level question in general. Like, are shows as required now as they were previously, before the internet, before the amount of publications, before YouTube, where somebody can like highlight what their speaker system is and broadcast it to the entire world? Like, are shows really that valuable?
Hell no. And this is the thing. There's a big throwback to shows, but here's what everybody noticed during COVID. No shows whatsoever. Sales skyrocketed. People didn't need to see, and that was noticed. Now, there is a throwback now. People are wanting to get back to the shows, wanting to do this. But the world's largest audio show is on your computer every day. Sure. Log on to Facebook, log on to YouTube, log on to Instagram. That's the world's largest audio show. And this is why these companies that blow everything on a weekend at this show and then take part in none of that it's insane. The show is good if you've got the rest intact. You want to do one or the other, you don't do the show. That's the key.
Do you see shows as kind of a way for brands that might already be on the path to then meet distributors, meet the...
That's big time. When you talk to the main companies, that's number one. And that's what Munich is great for. And yeah, I cannot diss Munich at all on that. They have all these, in fact, too many of them. These offices in the middle of the displays now, like up where the wide open exhibits Jason was talking about there used to be wide open spaces. They've filled those all with portable offices. So no sound rooms, portable offices where these things are jammed all day long with companies having meetings. And that's the important part. And ironically, it's probably more important for the established companies, not the new companies, because it's where the established companies can meet their distributors in one spot. Check in
what the feedback is, see how things are going, and kind of go from there, present what their new offerings are in real time.
Yeah.
let's go ahead and take a quick little short break, and we will be right back. Welcome back. We are here with Doug Schneider, Matt Bonaccio, and Jason Thorpe, and we're talking all about Munich High-End 2024. And just over the break, something that was brought up, which is fascinating to think about, this is actually Matt's first high-end show. So, Matt, what was the experience like to attend high-end Munich for the first time?
Just sheer overwhelm, I think, was like the main thing that stood out to me. Jason had just said earlier that it took him, and his first time, which I believe was last year. Is that right, Jason?
That's correct.
Anyway, you said that it took you about 3 days out of the 4-day show to actually learn where everything is and not get lost. And I can echo that sentiment completely. Like, it's just so huge, and you have to build this kind of mental map of like, where am I right now? You don't even know where to begin. But that's kind of what makes the spectacle and the experience what it is just that it's, like Doug said, you go there and you would definitely see so many things represented that it's everyone in the industry is there. It's the premier event of the year. So that was my first impression and most lasting impression of it.
And when we're kind of going through these shows, or this one in particular, let's say, was there any kind of standout experiences or kind of standout, let's go with standout companies first. Was there any standout companies that you folks kind of saw that you were like, wow, they did it really well?
Yeah, there's always a few. The Estalon room was really good. My first exposure to that brand, and it's one that Jason loves, that Doug loves, was in Warsaw. And it was a huge room, and like the listening conditions were not perfect because I was kind of in the back and off to the side. But in Munich, I was really blown away by the sound staging depth and imaging of those speakers. It was a really good sounding room, and putting together a great room at a show, no matter what show it is or who you are, it can be a real challenge. So that one was a standout for me.
And I can interject something because I was at Estalon a couple months before. They take that show very seriously, and they were hand listening to all the components that would make up the room and only taking what they really liked. It was for their X Diamond Signature Edition speakers. That's what they were debuting. But they started thinking of that months in advance, what was going to play in that room. And they tend to have the same room every year. It's a big, well set up room.
Very cool. What about you, Jason?
Something that always seems to stand in the way for me whenever I'm auditioning a room is companies that curate their own music and start off the demo, or you sit down and you say, "Can I hear X, Y, or Z?" And they go, "No." Just no, we're playing this music. And I'm like, and now I'm sitting down listening to some chamber music with like a string quartet that sounds like it was recorded in someone's bathroom. And you just have no idea whether it sounds good or not, because the music is either so foreign to me or it just you've got no referent. So this year we took a bit more of a hard line on these rooms and said, well, we didn't actually say it, but we sort of implied that we're not really going to write about it unless we can actually listen to something that we know. And we had to sort of go away and let them think about it, a couple of the rooms. But eventually they sort of said, yeah, okay, we'll hook up Tidal so you can hear whatever you want. So once we did that, there were a couple of rooms that really did stand out, and we had a ton of fun listening to them.
Yeah, I'll not just jump in there. I can see both sides because I've talked to manufacturers about this. Manufacturers want to curate the music like somebody does at home to show off their system. And I get that. And I don't mind listening to certain songs they've picked. But I learned a long time ago at home, when I sit there and curate all the music for who's listening, they're rarely blown away. Hand over the thing to them and let them play what they want to listen to instead of what you want them to listen to. And they're going to have a lot more fun.
I just think of it as this idea of like, who are you selling these speakers to? Are you selling them to yourself where like, you know what you already like, so you want to play that and you think that that is what everyone likes? Or are you going to try and sell it to the people that may have a different taste in music or want to hear something else that they have as their own kind of reference tracks for certain things that they're looking for?
And I get what they want to do sometimes. Sometimes they want to pick music that'll highlight certain aspects of the system or parts of the system or whatever. So that's kind of cool, kind of like people think. But on the other hand, you're right. Sometimes it is they're playing the music they like.
And it's not so much that it's just the music they like. I think that they have so much vested in this demonstration, and they've spent tens of thousands, up to potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars getting this stuff ready. And then you come in and you ask for I don't know, just something that you like that sounds like absolute garbage because it's poorly recorded. It's poorly mastered, and maybe it's just not even very good objectively. And then you play it, and then all of a sudden the room clears because everybody was sitting there listening to it goes, oh my God, this A sounds bad, and B, it's poor music. So I think that they want that really badly to not happen. So that's, I think, also a large portion of it. It's not just music that they like, it's something they know that sounds good, that will present their product in a good light.
And in fairness, we used to send Jason into rooms to rile up exhibitors like, go piss off this exhibitor, put on your Mr. Bungle, okay, and see how fast this clears the room. But we don't do that anymore. And so, case in point, and Jason could remark on the quality of this room. When we were in the Vivid room, we could pick our own music. We said we want to pick our own music. They said okay, because it was the big Moya speakers. And believe me, we wouldn't have liked them as much if we couldn't have heard our own music and they sounded amazing. So it was the debate between the Tragically Hip's Little Bones or Jason wanted Fight. Both off of Road Apples, right, Jason?
That's correct.
And Little Bones could have cleared the room quicker, or Fight is a little, Jason, a little more kind of, so we were cognizant of who was in the room while getting our own way. And I will say this, Jason said that's the best it's ever sounded. It is amazing.
Fight is a great song because it has some dynamic shading to it. It's got some rise and fall to it, and it has sparse sections and it has busy sections. This is not just a straight ahead rocker. So that was what sort of guided me towards that, and it was unbelievable. Like these, and
then I had them play Bruce Coburn's "Pacing the Cage," which few people hear. Because he's Canadian. So Canadians don't get out there, but everybody loves when they hear it. So it was a song I knew, but at the same time, I knew it wouldn't clear the room. I did want to play April Wine's Roller at high volume because that can differentiate a lot of speakers, but I held back on that one.
And Matt, there was, in the Estalon room, you played a Lyle Lovett track. Because Estalon was another one where we sort of asked them if we could play our own music, and they sort of went out of their way to accommodate us. But what was that Lyle Lovett track?
She's already made up her mind. I asked for that one. It's become something of a running joke now between the show in Warsaw and this past show, and hopefully coming shows that we'll have Jason go in rooms and play Mr. Bungle. That's why Doug made that joke. I didn't want to. That song followed another Tragically Hip song that Jason chose, and so I wanted to let them, have something that it wouldn't totally clear the room,
something that you could breathe around.
Yeah, it's a much calmer track, but I think it's really good, and it's got this like really, really deep sound stage and deep low bass that's kind of low in level, so it's a really good test of big speakers like that, and. They played it really well.
Yeah, it was breathtaking. I've never heard that track before. I've never heard that album before, but it was absolutely lovely. It was a very good choice.
It's from Joshua Judge's Ruth, and it's a very good CD. You could get it on vinyl. You can stream it, of course, but I have it on CD, and it's one that I often play to test equipment.
Now, do you find that because there's the first 2 days and the second 2 days that allow more general public, do you find the rooms and the companies are more accommodating on those first 2 days than the second ones, or vice versa, or is it pretty stable throughout when it comes to like playing your own music or just those interactions or all?
It depends on the company.
Yeah.
Some people. There was one company. Audio, was it? Who was sharing the room with Manny Audio? Was it Audio Solutions? Is that the company?
Yeah, that's Audio Solutions from Lithuania, and Java Hi-Fi from New Zealand. Yeah.
Yep. And the guy who Thomas, the guy from the turntable company, the Benny Audio company, he had a stack of records there with him, and he was playing LPs, and there was some great stuff in there, and he was happy to play whatever he had. Like we listened to some stuff off Led Zeppelin 2,
cool.
which you don't often hear Led Zeppelin coming out through the showroom, the show floor. It's one of those things that doesn't tend to show off speakers, although when you play it, everybody loves it and rooms fill up. But yeah, it depends on the company. Some companies are happy to play whatever the heck you want. Some are a little bit more nervous.
Are you noticing more modern taste in music, let's say, throughout the shows? Or is because you kind of have this idea of hi-fi and this like perception that it's all like classical people or classical music lovers and all that. Does that change? Is there any companies that are like, screw it all, we're doing rock and roll?
Well, Matt's the newcomer here. Matt, this is definitely, I think, something for you.
I actually did not get a chance to listen to those Vivid Audio Moya M1 speakers, but didn't you say, and don't we have on Global now, we have photographic documentation, I think even, that they were playing Damn by Kendrick Lamar?
Oh, no way.
Oh, that's possible. Yeah, you all could pick something like that. That's possible. Yeah.
Lawrence Dickey's pretty broad in his musical taste. Yeah.
Yeah, there was one rap track. I have no idea what it was, but it had bass that was like suck the air out of your lungs. It was insane.
Yeah, and this isn't to diss classical or anything, but damn it, you get into these rooms and they'll put on some choral thing and you can see they're just reveling in it. Like, look how good my system sounds. And everybody's bored as hell, just bored as hell. And it's a real problem. We could do a whole podcast on should they take requests or not? And it would lean more to yes, they should take requests and make people happy.
Just a little anecdote from the Florida Audio Expo, which we attended back in February. I was listening to a pair of fairly large Focal speakers, and they said, "What do you want to hear?" And I had them put on a track by a techno group called Sophie Tucker. It's called Purple Hat. And it's fun. It's a nice upbeat track with some female vocals, but it's got this thunderous crashing bass. It's just wonderful. And there was an old man, an old boomer guy who was standing behind me over my shoulder. He goes, "We can't listen to this. Can't we have some Jennifer Warnes?" I'm like, oh. Just wanted to thump him.
But I will say this, we got to bring up the one demo that I think blew all of us away, but Jason and I in particular. And we didn't pick the music because we couldn't pick the music because it was the Atmos demo there by PMC. And so you only had their Atmos tracks. So they had this thing for this Steve Wilson, who's a musician and engineer, I guess, and all. I don't know. Is he more of a musician or an engineer, Jason?
Both.
Do you know? Both. He's both. Okay, he's with Porcupine Tree, right? And anyway, he's some Atmos mixer now. It's kind of a guru of that. We didn't get into one of the demos because they had this 65-seat room with 21 speakers comprising the Atmos system, all of PMC's top stuff. And it was ticketed, and we didn't get tickets, of course, and because we didn't ask, and we just generally go our own way. Anyway, Keith, who leads marketing there, says, hey, I want to get you guys in at a demo. So come in at the very end of the day and they'll do a private demo for you guys. Not with Steve Wilson, but the PMC guys themselves. So Matt and Jason and I all convened on the room at the end of the day. Okay, take it, Jason.
Well, Matt and I were already 2 beers in.
It's the fault of the Hagel guys.
Yeah.
We should add that in.
They go ahead.
They just kept them coming. They said, come by for a beer. And we said, yeah, sure. Okay. And then we were like, okay, we got to take off. And they're already putting a fresh bottle in our hands. One for the road, boys. And we said,
Amazing.
Okay. Yeah.
You can't go to Germany and not have some good beer.
Oh, good Lord. Yeah. These were big 600 ml bottles, right?
They weren't normal size. Yeah. They weren't like your normal 12-ounce beer. They were like, yeah.
But I was sober. I wasn't there. I just met him at the PMC room.
He hopefully wasn't too upset with us.
So we walked in with about half a beer left in our hand and sat down in this massive room with gantries all over the place, like, those sort of 3-sided scaffolding things, rigs going up over the top with speakers everywhere, and these monster speakers up front. 4 huge subs. And they started off quite nicely and quite civilized, playing a little Billie Eilish track where they're sounding all sad and, depressed and broken up and shit. Can I say that? Can I say?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, because she does always. Yeah.
And then they played a techno track, which had really good, super deep bass. You could feel your hair actually moving, which was kind of cool.
And this was all Atmos mixes.
Oh, yeah.
So they were surrounding you and doing all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, tricks. And it was going you could almost see the sound whipping all over your head and round behind you and stuff. And it was great. But then they played a Who track.
No, Miles Davis came first, remember?
Oh, yeah. Miles Davis, something off Kind of Blue, which is nice. And, you've heard it a million times, and it sounded great because it was all discreetly mixed and everything was, broken up and around you. And it was fantastic. It was really good.
A cool note about that, how they created that Atmos mix was they went to Capitol Studios, because it's Atmos. I mean, Miles Davis didn't record in surround. So what they did was played it live in the studio and recorded the room sounds of that
amazing.
Recording in the room, and then mixed that with the recording to create the atmospheric sound that you hear, because it's a pretty subtle atmos. You hear, Miles Davis and whatnot up front, and then you hear mostly room ambience around. So it's pretty nice.
And then I think they played a King Crimson track off the first album. I asked for that, hoping I wasn't sure which King Crimson track it was going to be. I was hoping it was something off of one of the 3 80s albums that Steven Wilson had actually remixed. So I was hoping it was going to be something off Discipline or something like that, which is a big time favorite to me. But it was off their first album, and it was old guy music. It was all right. But again, beautifully mixed, all kind of surrounding you. And then they played after that, they played the Who's Baba O'Reilly.
And it was kind of like, we were done. Song. And Oliver Thomas, who's Peter Thomas is the co-founder of PMC, and Oliver Thomas is his son, leads all day. He's like, you want to hear Baba O'Reilly? And we're like, yeah. This was mind-blowing. This was like it.
Yeah, because
they cranked it up for us, too.
Oh,
it was like the loudest thing we listened to all weekend, for sure.
I had a decibel meter on my phone. I don't know whether it's accurate above 100. It might have been becoming logarithmic once it gets past a certain point. But I was getting peaks of about 104 dB.
No way, that's amazing.
But the weird thing was, you could talk over it.
It was clean.
Oh, it wasn't
clean.
Like muddy or interesting.
No.
And I've listened to it subsequently at home, and it's not the best mix. Like it's pretty muddy all up front. It sounds great, but it's not very well differentiated. But what's really struck me was specifically how crisp and visual and 3-dimensional the drums were, which were center up front, which weren't atmosed all over your head, but you could really get a sense of the drum kit, which I've never heard before.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. Like that opening, you have that organ, and they have that. It's going swirling all around you. That's synth, kind of a little bit gimmicky, but it was kind of cool. It fits the song. And then the piano comes in, and then the drumming comes in, and you're like, this is like another world. I've never heard the drums that clean on that track. Like,
it was so immersive,
but at the same time isolated. You could the cymbal was coming from right there. The drums were getting hit right there. It was Gordon actually called it. There's a name for it: spatial unmasking. What it is when they can spread the soundstage all over the place, they can make the sounds clearer. So now the speakers aren't just clear, but the specificity of them in these locations becomes clear. And then Roger Daltrey's voice was right dead center. It was like the best thing ever. Like, there's no reproduction of that song that I've heard that came close to that.
Nothing I've actually ever heard reproduced at all ever really came, sort of lives up to that.
And I was going to write an editorial, but Matt's writing an editorial because I'm too tired this month, that this is Atmos's killer app. 20 years ago, the late Wes Phillips, who wrote for us, said, all these new technologies need a killer app, something that can sell the technology. I want this technology. What's going to sell it? Like, stereo, you could have bowling ball going across the front of the stage or something like this. This was the killer app. This thing in Atmos was unbelievable. You would go, I want this at home.
That is a good kind of segue to maybe, let's say, our favorite products that you saw at the show, and what was your favorite exhibit or company that you saw? Who wants to kick it off?
Matt?
I'm going to steal a little bit of your thunder, actually, because you wrote about it in your coverage, but I was impressed in hindsight with crystal cables, because you go to these shows and cable companies always have a presence, but they're never really at the forefront of anything. But Crystal Cables out of the Netherlands really did a good job of, well, first of all, they had a dedicated room where they were showing, here's our new products. They're very attractive. I got to hold this power cable that I think cost at least 18,000 euros, but like you could tell just like holding it and looking at it that it was worth it. Like the materials and the build quality were all there. And then Jason went around and surveyed all the different rooms that their products were featured in, but that was impressive to me.
And what would be the product that you'd want to go home with if you could? Money is no object.
Oh, that's tough. I hadn't thought about that.
Those Estelon speakers, they fit
the
in your
Estelon
apartment?
Speakers. They might not quite fit.
Make them fit.
The Total DAC stuff, which I covered too. We haven't mentioned them yet, but Total DAC is a French company, and they had a very impressive room featuring brand new speakers that were like carved out of hardwood. They weren't MDF boxes or even CNC'd. Well, I guess it was CNC'd hardwood. So like the finish on the outside was just the grain of the wood that it was carved out of. They must have taken down like 2-3 huge old trees to make these things, but not very eco-friendly, but they were gorgeous speakers and they sounded amazing. I liked awesome. Those.
What about you, Jason? What would be a company that you're like, oh, that was a standard? And then what would be a product that you'd want to go home with if you could?
Well, I've already put the request in for those PMC speakers, the ones that the 2 front channel speakers that they had in the Atmos room. They're a pair of large floor standers. Actually, they're actually stand mounts. They had them stacked up on another pair of speakers, but they're a large stand mount with, I think, a 12-inch woofer.
I don't know the name, but it's actually can be, so it's a large stand mount, but then you can add another woofer section to it. Yeah. And that's what they had underneath it. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're just back to that PMC room. Something that's of note here. Before we left, I said, "Okay, how much is all of this? If I want all of this in my house, how much?" And they kind of did a little sort of like a Vulcan mind meld thing, and came back and they went 300,000 euros. And I'm like,
that's less than I would have expected, to be totally honest.
No, that took us by surprise, because there were like sort of value for money, like dollars for pounds for weight, you're getting a heck of a lot there. You could spend a third of that on cables from other rooms. And I guess PMC has a presence in the pro world also. So I guess pro companies and studios aren't willing to spend audiophile money, but they want value for money.
Hey, PMC, Professional Monitor Company.
There you go.
That's why they have that presence.
Yep. And so value for money, that was just off the charts. But yeah, those speakers I want to come home with. Plus there was a turntable from Benny Audio, which again is a Polish company. It's an oddest name, like Benny, Benny Audio, which is, it's just, it's interesting. It sticks in your mind. You remember it. Certainly not the most glamorous name, but they make some pretty well engineered turntables. So those are the two products that I've specifically requested.
Well, we're coming pretty much right at time. So I'm going to throw a question out to all of you. I'm going to start with Matt because this is his first appearance on the SoundStage Audiophile podcast. Matt, if there was a soundtrack to your life or a specific album or even song maybe that you would say kind of sums up your life or what you like, or you just want other people to hear, what would that be?
Oh, gosh. You're putting me on the spot here, Jorden. Let's see.
They did it to me last time too.
Can I choose something that's like the anti-audiophile album?
Of course. Anything.
One of the things that I really like to jam out to and that I don't think I could really put in a review. Well, you know what? Maybe I will now. One of my all-time favorite albums is Diamond Eyes by Deftones. And it's kind of an alternative metal album, but it's actually really well produced, and there's a good mix of really loud, heavy songs and also kind of more calmer tracks. So there's something for everyone there. But that one's a favorite of mine.
Very cool. I like it. It's going on my list. Jason, what about you? What's new in the musical realm or old that you'd that comes to mind right now?
Well, Tom Waits is my main man.
Yep.
I'd have to pick something off of Real Gone. Let's say the track Don't Go Into That Barn.
Don't Go Into That Barn. Done. It's on my list of things to listen to later today. Doug, you have a road trip coming up. You're gonna jump in the car for about 2 hours. What are you throwing on?
I'm going to bring up something because Jason has to write an apology article over this. So like a couple months ago on Ultra, SoundStage Ultra, he was writing about Van Halen and the debut albums, and he was crapping on a bunch of artists, including Olivia Rodrigo, who I've never listened to. So I was looking at these best of lists he cites, okay? And I look up and I see this one and I think, how can this best of list exist and not have Tracy Chapman's debut album, which is one of the best debut albums of all time? It was the best debut albums of all time. But there's Olivia Rodrigo on it, like Jason said, at like 29. So then I find some other best 100 debut albums. It does have Tracy Chapman. But then I'm like, there's Olivia Rodrigo again, quite high. What the hell is with this Olivia Rodrigo, right? And so I said, Jason, there may be something to this Olivia Rodrigo. So I'm going to download the album and listen. And damn, that first album when it came out when she was 18 years old, I don't put it up there as one of the like beyond Tracy Chapman's debut album, but it's really, really good. Sour. And Jason listened to it and has to admit he might have been wrong singling her out as, what do you think about that? Because I'll be honest, it's a really good album.
I know. The problem was my 13-year-old daughter was playing it a lot. At the same time, she's playing Drake, and I'm like, oh. So I just kind of mushed the two together, and it was, he should only play her songs about the sad breakups. So it sort of got me a bit of a bee in my bonnet about it because I sort of merged it with some of the other awful stuff she listens to. But then Doug says, you should really give a listen to this. And I did. And I went, oh man, it's good. So it's been on my mind too, Doug.
It's notably extremely good. I'll give it that. I wouldn't say it's a bad. You know what? Hey, 5-star Rolling Stone review. I would say I'd give it a 4. I wouldn't say, really a solid album. I guess she wrote all the songs. They're quite catchy, plays well. She can play them live, do all that sort of thing. She's the real deal. Jason's got to follow that up, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
I might begrudgingly download some and listen to it.
Yeah, there's she's got a new album out too called Guts, I think it is.
Okay.
And it's surprisingly good too.
But I think Sour's better. I'll tell you the shocking thing though, Jorden. When you find Olivia, like I've always said with many of these new artists, could somebody actually name a song, let alone the lyrics? Well, the people who follow Olivia Rodrigo, Jason can attest to that. They know every word to every song.
Yeah.
Every single one.
Are they Swiftie level?
Getting there, not quite so stupidly obsessed.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
no, you gotta listen. I would say listen to Driver's License and Enough for You. That's what I tell people. And it's really good. And then actually, you want to see something, she does pretty good job, but she makes the happier song. She's in Carly Simon's induction into the Hall of Fame or whatever. She sings You're So Vain. And she does a remarkably good job, but she doesn't make it into the kind of angry song that Carly Simon. She makes it into a happier song. But she's definitely talented.
And with that, I think we're going to wrap it up. Thank you very much, all three of you, for joining us today.
You're very welcome.
It was a pleasure.
Thanks, Jorden.
Take care, guys. All the best.
Thanks for having us.